England does heritage rather well, or so we tell ourselves. Gift shops in ruined cloisters, tea rooms where monks once ate in silence, National Trust car parks where medieval processions walked. We have turned destruction into tourism and called it preservation. But behind the picturesque archways, beneath the manicured lawns, something happened here that visitor guides prefer to gloss over. Scattered across these islands are the remains of over 800 religious houses. Communities that existed for centuries before they were erased in less than 5 years. Abbots who refused to sign documents and died for it. Monks who watched their homes pulled down stone by stone. Buildings so thoroughly destroyed that finding them now requires archaeology. I have gone through dissolution records, pension rolls, and execution accounts to bring you the monasteries where something terrible happened. Places where the grass grows through chapter house floors because the men who prayed there were scattered to the wind. Let us begin. Travelling to Cheshire, we find the remains of Norton Priory. Or rather, we find where Norton Priory used to be. Augustinian canons had prayed there since 1134. Over 400 years of continuous occupation. By 1536, only 9 remained. They surrendered in August without resistance. What choice did they have? Commissioners arrived and began the methodical process of asset stripping. Workers climbed onto the roof and stripped away the lead. Bells that had called monks to prayer for centuries were taken down and melted. Glass windows were removed and sold. Prior William Birkenhead received a pension of £20 per year. He lived until 1558. 22 years watching his former home dismantled stone by stone. Local farmers discovered that abandoned monasteries made excellent quarries. Why cut new stone when perfectly good blocks lay there for the taking? Within decades, Norton Priory was being carted away to build houses and barns across Cheshire. The Norton Priory Museum displays medieval floor tiles discovered during excavations in 1971. Each one was walked on by monks who never imagined their house would simply vanish from the earth. The museum has a gift shop. The canons have been dead for 5 centuries. On the Lancashire coast, where the River Lune meets the Irish Sea, Cockesand Abbey occupied one of the most exposed sites in England. The Premonstratensian canons who founded it in 1180 chose isolation deliberately. They wanted distance from worldly distractions, a place where nothing existed but God, the wind, and the waves. By 1539, only 15 canons remained. They surrendered in January. The isolation that had been their spiritual strength became practical advantage. Demolition crews found the site so difficult to access that they left portions standing rather than complete the work. The octagonal chapter house survives to this day. Its original vaulted ceiling remains intact. Visiting Cockesand requires walking across farmland. There are no facilities, no visitor centre, no signage. The building simply stands there, alone, near the shoreline. The last remnant of a community that lasted 3.5 centuries. Tidal erosion now threatens what remains. Parts of the medieval precinct have already been lost to the sea. Somewhere beneath the surrounding fields lies the monks' cemetery. The exact location has been forgotten. Abbot John Rishton received a modest pension. He died within 5 years. Moving inland to Shropshire, Lilshall Abbey tells a different kind of story. Its annual income of £250 put it just above the first threshold, a temporary reprieve. In October 1538, the abbey surrendered anyway. The site was granted to James Levison, a Tudor merchant whose family would prosper from monastic lands. The abbey church was deliberately destroyed. This was not mere neglect. Commissioners specifically ensured that the church could never be used for Catholic worship again. Roofs were torn down. Walls were pushed over. Sacred spaces were rendered uninhabitable. Yet somehow, the processional doorway survived. It stands today as one of the finest pieces of Romanesque architecture in Shropshire. Elaborate carved stonework depicting angels and foliage frames a doorway that now leads nowhere. Monks once passed through here in solemn procession on feast days. Now visitors walk through and find only grass and sky. English Heritage manages the ruins. Few visitors come compared to more famous sites. The gift shop is modest. In South Yorkshire, Monk Breton Priory housed 12 Cluniac monks when commissioners arrived in November 1538. They surrendered without incident. What makes Monk Breton unusual is what survived. The administrative buildings remain while the church fell. The prior's lodging still displays its original fireplace. The latrine block reveals surprisingly sophisticated medieval sanitation, running water flushed waste through a system that would not be out of place centuries later. Prior Thomas Frobisher received a pension of £16 annually. Some historians believe he was related to the explorer Martin Frobisher, possibly an uncle or cousin. For centuries after dissolution, cattle grazed in what had been the nave of the church. Sacred ground became farmland with barely a pause. These smaller houses went quietly. They had no choice. Isolated communities of a dozen monks could not resist the power of the Tudor state. But when Cromwell turned his attention to the great abbeys, he encountered something he had not anticipated: resistance. In October 1536, the largest rebellion in Tudor history erupted across northern England. Within weeks, an army of between 30,000 and 40,000 rebels had gathered under a lawyer named Robert Aske. They called themselves Pilgrims. The movement became known as the Pilgrimage of Grace. Their demands were clear: restore the monasteries, remove Cromwell from power, reverse the break with Rome. For several terrifying weeks, the rebels controlled most of northern England. Royal forces were hopelessly outnumbered. Henry adopted a conciliatory approach. He promised negotiations. He offered pardons. He suggested that grievances would be addressed. The rebels believed him. They dispersed and returned to their homes. It was a trap. Once the threat had dissipated, Henry ordered brutal reprisals. Robert Aske was arrested, tried for treason, then executed in July 1537. He was hanged in chains at York and left to die slowly, his body displayed as a warning to anyone who might consider future rebellion. Approximately 216 people were executed in the aftermath. Among them were several abbots who had either supported the rebellion or failed to oppose it enthusiastically enough. Their deaths would serve as object lessons for every monastery in England. Deep in the Yorkshire Dales, surrounded by green hills and quiet farmland, lies Jervaux Abbey. Cistercian monks had lived there since 1156, almost 4 centuries of unbroken occupation. The abbey was famous throughout England for 2 things. Its horse-breeding program supplied quality animals to nobles across the country, and its monks had developed the recipe for Wensleydale cheese. Abbot Adam Sedbar watched the Pilgrimage of Grace unfold with growing anxiety. He did not lead the rebellion. He did not rally his monks to take up arms, but he also did not actively oppose it. He did not inform authorities about rebel movements through his lands. In the aftermath, that was enough. Sedbar was arrested and transported to London. His trial was a formality. The verdict had been decided before proceedings began. In June 1537, the elderly abbot was executed at Tyburn. Contemporary accounts describe him as being in such poor health that he could barely stand at his own execution. The abbey was dissolved shortly after. Buildings were deliberately destroyed with unusual thoroughness. This was not simple asset stripping, it was punishment. The ruins of Jervaux are particularly fragmentary because of this vindictive demolition. Walls barely stand. Arches have collapsed into heaps of stone. Yet somehow, the destruction has produced a strange beauty. Nature has reclaimed what humans tore down. Grass grows through floors. Trees have taken root in chapter house corners. The site is privately owned today. Access is through an honesty box. It receives a fraction of the visitors that flock to better-known abbeys. The silence there is profound. The cheese outlasted the monks by 500 years. In the Ribble Valley of Lancashire, Whalley Abbey stands as a monument to miscalculation. Cistercian monks founded it in 1172. Abbot John Paslew initially expressed support for the Pilgrimage of Grace. As the rebellion failed and royal vengeance began, he tried desperately to distance himself. He claimed his earlier statements had been misunderstood. He protested his loyalty to the crown. It was too late. Paslew was arrested in February 1537. His trial was held locally. His execution was designed to make a specific point. In March 1537, the 80-year-old abbot was hanged outside his own abbey gates, not beheaded, as befitting his rank, but hanged like a common criminal. He died within sight of walls he had served for 30 years. A plaque marks the execution site today. The gatehouse where Paslew met his end still stands. Whalley Abbey now operates as a conference centre, run by the Diocese of Blackburn. Visitors come for retreats and quiet reflection. Many are unaware of the violence that took place there. Locals sometimes report seeing ghostly monk figures walking the grounds at night. Whether these are genuine apparitions or simply visitors from the retreat centre moving about in darkness remains unclear. On the East Yorkshire coast, Bridlington Priory had been an Augustinian foundation since 1113. It ranked among the wealthiest houses in the north. Prior William Wood made the mistake of joining the Pilgrimage of Grace. He wrote letters supporting the rebel cause. Letters survive, evidence exists. Wood was arrested, transported to London, and executed at Tyburn in 1537. The priory was dissolved shortly after. What makes Bridlington unusual is what survived. Local parishioners successfully petitioned to keep the nave of the priory church. They argued it was their parish church, not simply a monastic building. The argument worked. Bridlington Priory Church remains in use today as a Church of England parish church, a Grade 1 listed building containing medieval misericords, carved wooden seats where monks once rested during long services. The survival was essentially accidental. Most of the priory was demolished as usual. But because locals needed somewhere to worship, one portion was spared. Wood was described by contemporaries as learned and virtuous. His crime was writing the wrong letters to the wrong people. In Northumberland, Hexham Abbey possesses one of the most remarkable survivals in English religious architecture. Its crypt dates to 674 AD, one of the oldest structures in England still standing. The Saxon builders constructed it from Roman stone, salvaged from the nearby military site at Corbridge. When you descend into that crypt, you are walking on stones that were cut by Roman masons and reassembled by Anglo-Saxon monks over 1300 years ago. The Augustinian canons who occupied Hexham in the Tudor period supported the Northern Rebellion. The abbey was dissolved in 1537, but the parishioners of Hexham mounted a successful campaign to save their church. They argued, truthfully, that the abbey church was also their parish church. The authorities relented. Hexham Abbey survived relatively intact. It remains in use as a parish church today. The night stair is still visible, the stone steps that monks would descend directly from their dormitory to the church for night prayers at 2 a.m. The frith stool sits in the sanctuary, an ancient stone chair that conferred protection on anyone who touched it. Under medieval law, those seeking sanctuary at the stool could not be arrested. Hexham represents the rare case where community action actually saved a building. It worked because the townspeople organised, petitioned, and refused to accept destruction. Such successes were vanishingly rare. After 1537, Cromwell encouraged voluntary surrender. The word encouraged carried an implicit threat. Abbots had seen what happened to Sedbar and Paslew and Wood. They understood that resistance meant death. One by one, the great houses signed away centuries of institutional history. The process was methodical. Commissioners arrived with documents and inventory sheets. Valuables were catalogued and removed. Gold and silver plate went directly to the royal treasury. Lead was stripped from roofs. Approximately £600,000 of lead was stripped from monastery roofs across England. Bells were taken down and melted. Medieval bell founding was a highly skilled craft. The metal was valuable. The great bells that had called monks to prayer for centuries were reduced to ingots. Libraries were dispersed. Some books were saved by scholars who recognized their value. Many more were destroyed. John Bale, an early Protestant writer who witnessed the dissolution, recorded what he saw. Some purchasers used the library books to scour their candlesticks. Others used them to rub their boots. Manuscripts containing centuries of accumulated knowledge were treated as cleaning rags. What happened at Glastonbury was something else entirely. Glastonbury Abbey in Somerset was the wealthiest monastery in England, among the oldest. Tradition claimed it had been founded in the 7th century. Legend connected it to Joseph of Arimathea, who supposedly visited Britain carrying the Holy Grail. King Arthur and Queen Guinevere were supposedly buried there. Their tomb discovered in 1191. Whether any of this was true mattered less than what people believed. Glastonbury was a place of pilgrimage, of legend, of immense spiritual significance. It was also immensely rich. Abbot Richard Whiting had led the community for 14 years. He was 78 years old. When commissioners arrived demanding surrender, he refused. He would not sign away his abbey voluntarily. Cromwell's response survives in a handwritten note. The abbot of Glaston to be tried at Glaston and executed there. The verdict was predetermined. The trial was theatre. In November 1539, Whiting was dragged on a hurdle through the streets of Glastonbury and up the steep slopes of Glastonbury Tor, the distinctive hill that dominates the Somerset landscape. At the summit, he was hanged. Then he was cut down while still alive. Then he was drawn, his abdomen cut open, and his entrails removed. Then he was quartered, his body cut into 4 pieces. His head was displayed on the abbey gate. The man who refused to surrender his monastery was made into a public spectacle of royal power. Glastonbury Abbey was demolished. Today, 36 acres of ruins remain. The abbot's kitchen survives, a remarkable medieval building with an octagonal roof. A simple sign in the grass marks where King Arthur's tomb supposedly lay. Visitors come by the thousands, a mixture of Christian pilgrims and seekers drawn by the site's association with alternative spirituality. The gift shop does excellent business. Whiting is now venerated as a Catholic martyr, beatified by Pope Leo XIII in 1895. He was described by contemporaries as a man of great age who accepted death patiently. He had no choice. York Moors, Rievaulx Abbey was once the largest Cistercian community in England. At its peak in the 12th century, it housed 140 monks and 500 lay brothers, a community of over 600 men devoted to prayer, agriculture, and manuscript production, all living in a remote valley. By 1538, only 22 monks remained. They surrendered in December without resistance. Abbot Edward Kirkby received a pension of £66 per year, a substantial sum reflecting cooperation with commissioners. The site was granted to Thomas Manners, Earl of Rutland. Systematic demolition followed, roofs removed, lead stripped, but the walls were left standing, too massive and too expensive to pull down completely. The refectory wall survives almost to its full height. Standing beneath it, you can sense the scale of what existed here. Medieval heating systems discovered beneath the floor suggest the monks were not as austere as sometimes portrayed. Aelred of Rievaulx, a 12th century abbot and writer, is now considered a patron saint of friendship. His works on spiritual friendship survived because copies existed elsewhere. The man himself has been dead for 860 years. His abbey has been a ruin for nearly 500. Kirkby lived until 1568 on his pension, 30 years watching the ruins slowly decay. Fountains Abbey in Yorkshire was the second wealthiest Cistercian house in England. Cistercian monks founded it in 1132, choosing a remote valley they called the Vale of the Deadly Nightshade. They cleared the land, built their buildings, and created one of the most prosperous monastic communities in the country. Marmaduke Hubie, abbot in the early 16th century, built a perpendicular tower that still dominates the ruins. It was a statement of confidence, a declaration that fountains would endure. He was wrong. The abbey surrendered in November 1539. The last abbot, Marmaduke Bradley, received a pension of £100, an enormous sum suggesting full cooperation. The site was sold to Richard Gresham, a speculator who stripped the lead and bells and sold whatever could be carted away. In the 18th century, the ruins became fashionable. The Aislaby family incorporated Fountains Abbey into their designed landscape at Studley Royal, creating ornamental gardens with medieval ruins as a picturesque centerpiece. What had been a working monastery became a backdrop for aristocratic leisure. Today, Fountains Abbey is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Over 300,000 visitors come every year. Hubie's Tower still stands. 160 feet of stone, visible for miles. The solarium remains intact. At 300 feet long, it is the longest surviving Cistercian building in Europe. Fountains Abbey is undoubtedly beautiful. But it is beautiful in the way that ruins are beautiful. It is beautiful because of what was destroyed. The National Trust Cafe serves excellent scones. On the Welsh border, in the Wye Valley, Tintern Abbey presents a different kind of aftermath. Cistercian monks founded it in 1131, the first Cistercian monastery in Wales. Compared to the great English houses, Tintern was relatively poor. Its isolation limited its income. The abbey surrendered in September 1536. The last abbot, Richard Wyche, received a pension of £28. He disappears from historical records after that. His fate is unknown. Tintern was never rebuilt, never converted to other uses. It simply stood empty, slowly falling into decay. And then it became famous. In the late 18th century, tourists discovered the picturesque qualities of ruined abbeys. Tintern, with its spectacular setting in the wooded valley, became a destination for those seeking romantic landscapes. The painter J.M.W. Turner visited multiple times. His images helped establish the aesthetic of beautiful decay. In 1798, William Wordsworth visited and wrote one of the most famous poems in the English language. He found beauteous forms providing solace in memory, a refuge from the wearying world. The great east window frame survives complete. Its tracery silhouettes against the sky create one of the most recognizable images in British heritage. Cadw manages the site. Tintern is the most visited abbey ruin in Wales. Visitors come seeking exactly what Wordsworth found: peace, beauty, and a sense of time's passage made tangible in stone. The monks who built those walls never imagined they would become a tourist attraction. They never imagined their home would become a ruin at all. Some abbeys survived as picturesque monuments. Others vanished so completely that finding them requires excavation. Reading Abbey was a royal foundation. Henry I, son of William the Conqueror, established it in 1121 and was buried there when he died in 1135. His body lay in the abbey church for 4 centuries. Abbot Hugh Cook Farringdon resisted surrender. Like Whiting at Glastonbury, he refused to sign away his monastery voluntarily. Like Whiting, he paid with his life. In November 1539, Farringdon was executed in front of his own abbey, hanged alongside 2 of his monks, and John Eynon and John Rugg. All 3 are now venerated as Catholic martyrs. The abbey was demolished with exceptional thoroughness. Almost nothing remains visible today. The ruins are hidden within an urban landscape. Most Reading residents are unaware they exist. Forbury Gardens, a Victorian public park created in 1861, covers much of the former site. A bandstand stands where the nave once was. Henry I's body was lost at the Dissolution. England's king, buried in one of England's grandest abbeys, has no known grave. There is a Costa Coffee nearby. In Gloucestershire, Hayley's Abbey was famous throughout medieval Europe for a single object: a phial supposedly containing the holy blood of Christ. Pilgrims came from across Christendom to pray before this relic. The abbey's wealth depended on their donations, and in 1538, Cromwell's commissioners examined the relic. They declared it to be honey clarified and coloured with saffron, a fake. The announcement was used as propaganda throughout England. Proof, officials claimed, of monastic deception. The monks had been swindling the faithful for centuries. Modern historians are less certain. The substance may have been genuine animal blood that had congealed and changed colour over time. But the damage was done. The relic was destroyed. The abbey was dissolved in December 1539. Richard, Earl of Cornwall, founded the abbey in 1246. He was the brother of Henry III, one of the most powerful men in England. His foundation lasted less than 300 years. The monks scattered without receiving pensions for years. Some found work as parish priests. Many simply disappear from historical records. The Abbey Museum displays excavated artifacts, floor tiles with heraldic designs, cloister foundations visible in the grass. English Heritage manages the site. Admission is charged. Cleeve Abbey in Somerset tells the rarest story of all. What happens when destruction fails? Cistercian monks founded it in 1198. By the Dissolution, only 17 monks remained. They surrendered in September 1536. What makes Cleeve unique is what happened next, or rather, what did not happen. Unlike most dissolved monasteries, the domestic buildings at Cleeve survived almost complete. The reason was practical. After dissolution, the site was converted to a farm. The buildings were useful for storing hay, sheltering livestock, housing farm workers. Because they served agricultural purposes, their roofs were maintained. They did not fall into ruin. The refectory has its original medieval timber roof, the only complete Cistercian refectory roof surviving in England. Painted angels decorate the ceiling. Some original paint remains visible after 500 years. The dormitory was converted to a barn, but the individual monks' cells remain visible. Chapter house floor tiles remain in place. Medieval craftsmanship walked on for 800 years. Cleeve receives a fraction of the visitors who flock to Glastonbury or Fountains. It remains relatively unknown. The last abbot, William Dovell, received a pension of £40. He lived until 1548 in a nearby village. The abbey survived because it was useful, not because anyone cared about preservation. Usefulness saved what sentiment could not. Between 1536 and 1541, over 800 religious houses were dissolved. Approximately 12,000 monks, nuns and friars were expelled from their communities. Land worth approximately £1.3 million was transferred to the Crown. Within a generation, most of it had been sold to private buyers. Henry VIII never visited most of these places. He simply wrote his name on documents, and men in his service did the rest. Thomas Cromwell was executed in 1540, accused of treason and heresy by the same king he had served so efficiently. His head was displayed on London Bridge, the architect of dissolution destroyed by the machine he helped create. The abbots who died: Whiting at Glastonbury, Sedbar at Jervaux, Paslew at Whalley, Farringdon at Reading. They knew what was happening. They knew, and they could not stop it. The ones who survived did so by signing away everything their predecessors had built. Then they watched it fall. 500 years later, we walk through what remains. Not the monasteries, the spaces where monasteries were. Grass grows through chapter house floors. Trees have taken root in nave corners. Gift shops sell guidebooks explaining what used to stand here. Tea rooms occupy spaces where monks once ate in silence. We have turned destruction into heritage, erasure into tourism. We photograph the picturesque decay and call it beautiful. The walls remember, even when we prefer to forget.